Imagine a palace where jeweled lamps burn all night, where laughter echoes behind carved screens. But within these walls, secrets festered. Secrets of betrayal, lust, and murder that shaped empires. The harem was not a fantasy of romance. It was a fortress, a golden cage where noble women and enslaved concubines lived under constant watch, bound by power, fear, and ambition. To outsiders, it seemed like paradise. Perfumed air, marble fountains, music drifting through halls. But for those inside, every smile hid a dagger. Every glance could mean survival or execution. But what happened when the doors closed was far darker. The Sultan's harem held hundreds of women. Each one was a prisoner, a pawn, or a potential queen. And in this golden cage, rivalry was a blood sport. At its heart stood the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother. No one wielded more power inside these walls. Her word could crown princes, or have women strangled in silence. Every night, whispers rose like smoke. Who would be chosen for the Sultan's bed? Who would rise in favor? And whose fate was already sealed by poison or silk? For the concubines, beauty was both weapon and curse. A single misstep, a careless word, an unguarded look could send them to the dungeon or to a silk cord around the throat. The harem was built on silence. Walls absorbed screams, secrets stayed buried. To survive, women learned to smile while plotting. Their faces masks, their thoughts daggers sharper than steel. Lust was power. A concubine who captured the Sultan's gaze could command armies, topple viziers, and change history. Her beauty wasn't her own. It was a weapon wielded carefully. Others fought not for favor, but survival. Mothers schemed to protect their sons. If one prince became sultan, his rivals, brothers, nephews, even infants, were executed. A mother's love became political murder. Eunuchs patrolled every passage. Once slaves themselves, now they controlled women's lives. They smuggled letters, spread rumors, and sometimes chose who lived long enough to see another sunrise. Each jeweled cup, each silk pillow, carried danger. The deadliest assassinations came without screams, a poison sherbet. A silken bowstring tightened at midnight. Death here was as quiet as perfume. Outside, poets sang of harems as paradise. Inside, women knew it as battlefield. Their smiles were painted armor. Their survival, a game where a single mistake meant ruin. Even those who rose to power remained prisoners. Behind jeweled doors, freedom never came. The higher they climbed, the sharper the knives waiting in shadows for their inevitable fall. It wasn't just politics, it was survival. Women plotted to secure food, medicine, or a child's safety. In the harem, every act of kindness hid calculation. Every smile concealed strategy. A harem wasn't merely bedrooms. It was schools, hospitals, prisons, entire worlds behind gilded walls. And within this world, every rumor could topple an empire faster than armies outside. Behind silks and jewels, women bore scars unseen, some from betrayal, others from forced silence. To historians, they're faceless numbers. But within those walls, each life was a desperate war. The Sultan's power didn't rest only on armies. It rested on whispers in the harem. A single word from behind silk curtains could topple ministers or ignite wars. So why enter this golden prison at all? Some were kidnapped, others sold. Many were gifts from foreign rulers. Few chose, and none escaped without leaving blood behind. Would you risk power for survival? Or death for freedom? Once inside, escape was impossible. Guards watched day and night. Women wrote secret letters, smuggled through eunuchs. But each attempt carried risk of strangulation or drowning in the Bosporus. The harem was painted as paradise in poems. In truth, it was closer to a silent battlefield. And like any battlefield, it claimed the most innocent first. Behind gilded screens, history was rewritten. Alliances formed, betrayals decided, heirs chosen. But every alliance was temporary. The moment one woman rose too high, daggers appeared from the shadows. It was a prison made of velvet, a battlefield without swords. And those who entered rarely left with their lives, their voices, or their names intact. To the world, the harem shimmered like a jewel, but to those inside it was a labyrinth of betrayal, lust, and blood. And the first body had yet to fall. The first betrayal would silence the harem forever. At dawn the harem glittered, but beauty masked tension. Behind jeweled smiles, women sharpened invisible knives. Every gesture was theater. Every word whispered in silk carried the weight of life or death. The sultan's gaze was the crown. One night of favor could transform a concubine into queen, but his gaze was fickle, and for every chosen woman, 10 others plotted revenge. A jeweled hairpin became a dagger, a cup of sherbet a weapon. Inside this world, objects of beauty were twisted into silent killers, serving both desire and ambition. Allies were illusions. Women swore sisterhood in daylight, but by night traded secrets for survival. Betrayal wasn't weakness, it was currency, and those who refused to play often vanished silently. Rumors were sharper than steel. A whispered accusation of treachery could kill faster than poison. And in the harem, a woman's reputation lasted only until her rivals spoke. The Valide Sultan listened from her throne. Every rumor was weighed, every lie sharpened into truth. She had the power to bury rivals with a gesture, or crown them overnight. One night, a favored concubine vanished. Her cushions remained warm, her perfume lingering in the air, but her body was never found. The harem whispered. She had been erased. Who had silenced her? And why? The answer never came. Only silence. But her disappearance served as a warning. In the harem, death rarely announced itself with screams. It slipped in like perfume, unseen, unforgettable. Yet danger didn't always come from rivals. The Sultan himself was a storm. His favor could lift a woman into power, then crush her beneath suspicion before morning. Some women gambled everything for sons. A prince's survival meant her survival. But if her child threatened the wrong heir, the silken cord would tighten around them both. A prince's life could end in minutes. Brothers strangled brothers, nephews strangled cousins. And behind every death, a grieving mother whose tears were silenced by the empire's laws. Blood wasn't spilled in streets, it was spilled in silence. And while armies fought outside the palace, the deadliest battles were fought in whispers. Behind gilded doors, no soldier entered. One eunuch confessed in old age. He said he carried more bodies from harem chambers than from battlefields. He called the place not paradise, but a graveyard with jewels. The harem glittered with gold, but every jewel hid blood. Women vanished, sons strangled, rivals silenced. Behind the beauty lay only fear. Fear so deep it was never spoken aloud. But the next betrayal would shake the empire itself. A new favorite rose, a concubine of unmatched beauty. The Valide watched with cold eyes. She knew the higher a woman climbed, the deadlier her fall would surely be. The concubine's rise was swift, but envy sharpened in every corner. Her laughter at banquets was echoed by whispers in corridors, whispers that would soon turn into poison. At night, she received gifts, perfume, silks, jewelry, but among them lay her doom, a goblet filled with sweetness that carried death. She drank, and the whispers grew silent. The next morning, her cushions were empty. The Sultan raged, demanding answers, but no one spoke. Her beauty had been erased as quickly as it rose, leaving only silence. Her death wasn't just personal, it was political. The Valide had ensured her rival's fall, and in the harem, a single death often shifted the balance of an empire. But rumors of the concubine's murder spread beyond the harem. Ministers whispered, soldiers stirred, and rivals at court sensed weakness. The harem's secrets were bleeding into the empire itself. For the first time, the harem's hidden wars threatened the throne. What began as whispers between women would soon ignite into conspiracies that could topple rulers themselves. And the next betrayal would not stay hidden. The Sultan sensed unrest. Yet he never knew the true battlefield wasn't his throne room. but the jeweled corridors where women plotted with words sharper than steel. The palace gates gleamed, but inside women's schemes shook empires. Assassins were hired, letters smuggled, sons hidden, and with every secret, the harem's beauty became a mask for blood. By the end of that year, 3 concubines were gone, 2 princes strangled, and the Sultan himself no longer trusted his own blood. The harem had poisoned the empire itself. But the darkest betrayal was yet to come. With rivals gone, new passions ignited. The Sultan's gaze wandered again, but now it was not desire, it was obsession. Lust became a weapon sharper than blades, deadlier than poison. The Sultan demanded loyalty not with words, but with bodies. Women who refused his advances disappeared. Their silence echoed louder than screams, their absence a warning etched into golden walls. Yet some women played along. They fed his hunger, using seduction as strategy. In their painted smiles lay ambition. Each kiss was a step closer to power or to death. One night, a concubine whispered promises. By dawn, her throat was cut. Lust had given her access. Betrayal had sealed her fate. In the harem, desire was a death trap, but someone else was listening and plotting. Behind every affair lurked spies. Eunuchs carried secrets, selling them for gold or survival. Every sigh, every touch, every kiss, recorded, whispered, and weaponized against the very women it involved. The Valide Sultan ruled through silence. She did not need to kill. She only needed to hear. Secrets reached her ears, and women vanished before sunrise. One evening, the Sultan himself collapsed, choking on spiced sherbet. He survived. But the whispers began. Had one of his concubines tried to kill him? Or someone closer? Interrogations followed. Women were dragged from chambers, accused of poisoning, beaten for answers. Their screams echoed through marble halls, while the true conspirator remained hidden, smiling behind jeweled curtains. The Sultan grew paranoid. Every meal was tasted, every drink guarded. But paranoia only fed betrayal. In fear, he made enemies faster than he could eliminate them. Rivals turned to murder. Silk cords tightened around sleeping throats. Poison seeped into perfumes. The harem had become not a home, but a silent battlefield of endless executions. By dawn, 3 women were gone. No trial, no record. Their beauty erased, their names forgotten. And those left behind learned one truth. Survival meant becoming the predator, not prey. But one woman refused to remain silent. She began writing. Hidden letters carried by trusted servants beyond the palace. Letters that spoke of murders, lust, and secrets that could bring down an empire if revealed. Her words reached foreign ears. A rival court learned the Sultan's secrets, and in the shadows, an alliance formed. One that would use the harem's blood to topple its master. But betrayal came with a cost. Her letters were discovered. She vanished overnight, her ink-stained fingers silenced forever. Yet her words had already escaped the palace walls. The Sultan now faced enemies both inside and outside. His empire was bleeding from whispers and lust, and he no longer knew which betrayal would strike first. The harem grew quieter, smiles forced, laughter hollow. Behind jeweled doors, women no longer trusted anyone. Not sisters, not mothers, not lovers. Survival meant silence. Silence became the loudest scream. Desire still flickered, but love no longer existed. Every touch was calculated, every kiss tasted of fear. In the harem, even passion had turned into another weapon. By now, women weren't just concubines. They were pawns in a deadly game, and every pawn was expendable. Some would rise, most would vanish. None would ever be free, but the next death would shatter the palace. It began at night. A scream echoed across marble halls. Guards rushed. But inside the chamber lay a body, not of a concubine, but of a prince. The harem's whispers had spilled into bloodlines. A prince was murdered in his sleep. And suspicion spread like wildfire. Every woman now carried the shadow of guilt. The Sultan raged. He swore the killer would burn. But deep down, he knew the truth. The harem had consumed his bloodline. His sons were as unsafe as his wives. The walls of paradise had become prisons. And inside, betrayal turned inward. For the women, lust had been their tool. Now it was their curse. The empire outside saw strength. But inside the palace, women sharpened daggers with whispers, and princes died in silence. The harem was now the empire's deadliest battlefield. With the death of a prince, the empire trembled. The sultan's throne was now soaked not in wine, but in blood. And the harem's secrets were about to erupt, but the darkest secret had yet to be revealed. The prince's murder tore through the palace like wildfire. For the first time, whispers left the harem and reached the city streets. The empire began to taste its ruler's secrets. The sultan ordered investigations. Eunuchs, concubines, even guards were dragged to dungeons. Torture followed. Names were forced out. Truth and lies mixed, until no one knew who was guilty. The first execution came swiftly. A concubine accused of poisoning the prince was strangled with silk. Her body was buried in silence, her death both a warning and a message. But the whispers did not stop. The harem still plotted in silence. Fear spread, but so did defiance. Each execution only planted more seeds of rebellion within jeweled walls. Even the sultan's most trusted eunuch betrayed him, selling secrets to rivals abroad. If loyalty could not be bought, then betrayal had become the empire's true currency. But betrayal would soon strike even closer. A second prince fell mysteriously ill. This time it wasn't poison in sherbet. It was venom hidden in perfume, delivered by hands the sultan thought he could trust. The Valide Sultan tightened her grip. She ordered mass punishments, knowing fear could silence where reason could not. But even she underestimated the fury she had unleashed. The harem was no longer a sanctuary. It was a graveyard disguised in silk. Every chamber smelled of incense and blood. Every bed carried whispers of betrayal. Yet amid fear, love flickered. Forbidden affairs between concubines and guards bloomed. But love in the harem was a death sentence, and every stolen kiss carried the weight of execution. When discovered, the punishment was merciless. Guards impaled, women drowned in silk pillows. The sultan's rage knew no limits. Love was a crime he would never pardon. But the cruelty backfired. Instead of silencing them, it bound the women together. In whispers and coded glances, alliances were born from the ashes of forbidden love. Now the harem itself became a weapon. The women began turning their fury outward, plotting not only against each other, but against the sultan himself. And soon, blood would reach the throne. A false concubine was sent to the sultan. Her beauty hid a blade, but at the last moment her hand trembled, and her betrayal was uncovered. Her execution was spectacular. Thrown from palace walls at dawn, her body shattered before watching crowds. The sultan wanted the empire to see what treachery against him truly cost. But instead of fear, outrage spread. The people began to question. Whispers in the streets grew louder. Was their ruler protecting them or simply drowning his palace in blood? The sultan doubled down, silencing critics with executions. But each death only fed the fire. For the first time, the empire itself began to shake. The harem was no longer hidden. Its sins now spilled into the empire, and the world outside began to realize what happened behind golden doors could topple a throne. The sultan's paranoia deepened. He trusted no one, not wives, not sons, not guards. His throne grew taller, but so did the shadows surrounding it. A single slip could doom him, and one night he made it, falling asleep without guards by his door. Outside, the harem's daggers gleamed in silence. Would this be the night the sultan finally fell? But the attempt failed. A loyal guard discovered them. Once again, blood stained the floor, not of the sultan, but of women who dared to dream of freedom. Their deaths shook the harem. Yet each failed rebellion only deepened resolve. The women were no longer pawns. They were soldiers, bound by chains but sharper than any sword. Outside, the empire was crumbling. Enemies sensed weakness, borders burned with war, and still, inside the palace, the Sultan fought not nations, but the very women meant to comfort him. The harem had consumed everything: sons, wives, rulers, even the empire's image. What was once paradise had turned into its greatest curse. And yet, its darkest secret remained hidden. That secret was buried deeper than blood, more dangerous than betrayal, and closer to the throne than anyone dared to imagine. The harem's final weapon had yet to strike. The Sultan's empire staggered. His enemies closed in. But the deadliest enemy was still inside, the harem, where revenge had been simmering, patient, silent, and sharper than any invading army. The Valide Sultan, once feared, grew frail. With her fading strength, the harem's factions turned on each other, seizing power, spilling blood, and setting the stage for the final betrayal. The Sultan trusted only one woman now, his newest favorite. Beautiful, mysterious, and obedient. But behind her veil hid not devotion, but vengeance, sharpened across years of silent suffering. One night, as war drums thundered beyond palace walls, she entered his chamber. Perfume in the air, silence thick, her dagger cold against the throat of an emperor. The Sultan's eyes widened. Betrayal, at last, had reached his bed. But the dagger did not strike, not yet. She wanted him to hear her truth first, her whispered confession cut deeper than steel. She was no concubine by chance. She was the daughter of a slain noble, brought here in chains, waiting for her vengeance. The Sultan froze, realizing his greatest sin had returned to claim him. She was not property. She was the final judgment for every woman the harem consumed. But fate twisted cruelly. Before she could strike, guards burst in. Someone had betrayed her. Even vengeance in the harem was stolen, claimed by others before it could be fulfilled. Dragged in chains, she laughed. Her death would not silence the truth. The empire already knew. The harem's curse was no longer a secret, it was a prophecy. And when her blood spilled, the palace itself trembled. At dawn, she was executed. But the Sultan's empire fell soon after. Armies outside stormed the city. Enemies he feared least became the ones who delivered his end. The harem was abandoned, its silks left to rot, its fountains dry. What once gleamed with power and desire became a tomb of betrayal and memory. The Valide Sultan's throne sat empty. The walls that once echoed with laughter and whispers now groaned under silence. The empire had consumed itself, starting with its women, but the story did not vanish. Letters, chronicles, and whispered tales survived. History preserved what the harem tried to bury. The lives lost, the power struggles, the haunting truths. Generations later, the ruins of the palace still whispered. Travelers swore they felt unseen eyes watching them. Perhaps it was memory. Perhaps it was the women never silenced. The harem's secret had outlived its rulers. Its betrayals echoed louder than any victory. Its women, once erased, became eternal voices haunting history's golden lies, and yet the question lingers. Were these women victims, survivors, or rulers in shadows? The truth may never be clear, but their silence still shakes the thrones of history. And one truth may still remain hidden. Some scholars claim secret heirs were born, children of harem conspiracies who later ruled empires. If true, the harem shaped dynasties far more than any battlefield ever did. Others whisper that even in death, concubines cursed the bloodline. Plagues, rebellions, assassinations, all traced back to the moment betrayal first bloomed within those golden walls. The truth remains tangled in silk and secrecy. But one fact endures: the harem was never just a chamber of pleasure. It was an empire's beating, poisoned heart. Every conquest, every murder, every betrayal, the harem absorbed them all. And in the end, it destroyed even those who believed themselves untouchable. Centuries later, its ruins stand as warnings. A place where power devoured love, where betrayal was law, and where silence spoke louder than screams. History asks, How many stories still lie buried behind palace walls, erased by those who feared their truth?
And how many more still shape us unseen today?
And perhaps they were never buried at all. The harem's women, nameless in records, faceless in history, left behind something more powerful than gold or crowns. They left the reminder that silence itself can be an empire's undoing. Their story ends not in silence, but in warning.
Power built on betrayal always devours itself.
And the harem's echoes remind us, history's greatest secrets are never truly hidden. The walls are gone, but the whispers still remain.